So before I go even further, I'm gonna give you guys a very comprehensive, powerful breakdown on this because it's imperative that we talk about it. Let me give you guys what I was referring to earlier of people coming out and speaking ill will about the Black community. And then I'm going to show you some of the responses of them crying out for our support, even though they have never, ever supported us. I want you guys to listen in here and listen to this rhetoric.
Black community, remember when you were on TikTok saying, we're sending this one out, we're not doing anything. What are you gonna do now? You chose not to protest. Mexican people were protesting. White people were protesting. Yet you sit your at home while everybody else is work. Now they're pushing for segregation. And now it's going to be too late. Because I say it's laziness. Because you want everybody else to do the work, you know. What was the term you used? We're sitting this one out. Well, you sitting this one out, choosing to stay home, not protest. Now you're going to be segregated. Ain't that a...
I don't think Black people, you know, I just can't get over that. It's so sad.
Now, shout out goes to our brother Black Alpha for posting those videos on his X account. And I am going to show another clip to you guys. But she was basically stating that Black people are stating all online that we're sitting this one out. That white people are protesting, you know, Hispanic, Mexican people are protesting. And I want, instead of people just making empty comments, show us evidence of large groups of people supporting Black protests that are non-Black. Majority of the people who are protesting, okay, a lot of the people in Black protests for civil rights and because of injustice, like George Floyd, O.J. Simpson. I know that's really volatile, but these protests and peaceful gatherings that Black people have had are mostly geared around, again, 99%, because of racial injustice on some account. That is why Black people didn't even get in the streets when the Democratic Party let 11 million illegal immigrants in our country. And majority, I won't say majority, but a lot of those immigrants were dropped off in Black communities. A lot of these illegal immigrants were dropped off in Black communities. And then instead of providing more resources to the Black community, those sanctuary cities, mostly Democratic ran, pushed out the Black people from shelters and community centers, and they allowed people who are illegally in the country to now occupy that space. And none of those people ever stated that, okay, what about the Black people who were here before us? Are you going to help them out too? None of them spoke up for us. They only cared about their countrymen. They only cared about those people. So we see the very duplicity of the mindset of people where the Democratic Party has somehow downloaded or infused or manipulated through propaganda to help groups of people who are illegally in the country. And somehow some Black people grabbed the coattails, got on the gravy train of spewing and repeating that same rhetoric. What majority of Black people were stating, this is not what we want. We are American citizens, Foundation Black America, American citizens. We've been here before the inception of the country. And we are the ones who are in dire need of those resources, not people who are illegally in our country. So this is what we've been seeing for a very long time. Now she's stating, now they're calling for segregation. Now, what people don't understand is this. Most people in America hang around and live around their own kind. You do have some mixed communities where you'll see Asian people, Hispanic people, black people, and white people. But those neighborhoods are mostly affluent, meaning they're making salaries from 100,000 and above, right? Where they kind of mix and master. But majority of those neighborhoods are majority white because they're the ones who are making the most money in America next to Asians. So again, you go to certain areas around America in different pockets, you'll see Indian neighborhoods. I'm talking about people from India, the continent, the country. And then on reservations, you see Native Americans. You go to certain areas, you see Black Americans. You go to certain neighborhoods, you see Hispanic Americans. Right? You have these different demographics of people in certain neighborhoods because they gravitate to people that look like them. So America is already segregated on some accounts. Now, when you said segregated and then chuckled and laughed, what does that absolutely mean? Because America's always been segregated in some regards. We either be by race or by your status. So again, not understanding America altogether, you're just basically spewing empty comments. I'm gonna show you one more clip and then I'm gonna give you my breakdown of this.
Running us over, you're shooting us, all because of the color of our skin. All because we have culture, we brought it here, and we are who we are, and we love it here, and we help people here. That's what we're known for. We help people, and yet we're getting terrorized. We're going through this. Our families are our babies are literally being ripped from our hands. If someone could please tell me if there's something we can do to help our people, please just imagine yourself in our situation.
Okay, so this lady here is crying for support and help of her people, and I totally understand that. I'm not insensitive to the matter of which occurring. But when she stated, what can someone do? What can people do? The only response I have is to stop protesting for people who are illegally in the country. Stop protesting for people who may be in a legal status, may be a resident, may be a green card holder, and stop to have them to speak up and support people who are illegally in the country. Because again, you're dealing with an administration that is they have zero tolerance for anything anti-American. For anything anti-American. Because there's different echelons, different groups of people within the Hispanic community. Some are being very, very quiet. Maybe they make a certain amount of money. Maybe they are a certain status. Maybe they're in a certain capacity where they're not protesting. They're not being public. They're not even on social media. Then you have a large concentration of people who part of their family is illegally in the country and another part of their family may be citizens or may have a legal status in America. And these are a lot of people who are protesting. So my only quick answer is to stop protesting for people who are legally in the country. This is very, very imperative that, again, we understand while there has never been a black and brown coalition, there's never been a black and brown alliance, because believe it or not, a lot of the anti-racism has come from people who are Hispanic but look white. They have a term, and I always mess up this term. A lot of you guys who understand what I'm getting at, please correct me, but a literal rasa, meaning whitening up the race. Okay, because again, when we look back, okay, I'm gonna give you guys another breakdown, but I just want to go off on a tangent here when it comes to this. When we look back about the British people who fall in the UK, France, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, Germany, all these countries, Italy, who dealt in a system when it comes to the transatlantic slave trade as well as colonization around the world. We look at countries who are now suffering, okay, who are now going through a dichotomy and duplicit mindset of colorism. I want you guys to look at India. I did an interview, I think it was around 2 years ago, with a lady who's Indian, and how she was telling me in India that a lot of Indian people from I guess around the age of 5 to 10, the parents are to apply whitening cream to lighten up the skin if the children are dark. And this was left by the 100 some odd years that the British colonizers was colonizing India. And they always treated people with lighter skin better than those with darker skin, okay? Again, that adjacent to whiteness. This is what the British colonizer did. They did it everywhere they went. The lighter your skin, the smarter you were, the better treatment you have. Look at the dynamics in South Africa. Look at the dynamics in South Africa. If you was white, great. If you was colored, meaning you were mixed because you had fairer and lighter skin, you were treated better than those blacks who had skin like mine or who were darker than the so-called coloreds. Look at all the countries that are dealing with some sort of racial demographic tension of the same countrymen and how they are treated. When I went to Brazil, I saw colorism on a whole different scale. I saw Brazilians darker than me, my complexion, as light as the people you see on your screen right here, and even whiter than that. And it seemed as though the people who were a medium brown skin complexion, a medium brown skin tone, and darker, they were the ones who mostly lived in the favelas, meaning the hood and the ghettos, and the homelessness, and the people who were of lighter brown and higher are the ones who had jobs, careers, who own businesses. And you're telling me there's no colorism here. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, there are Afro-Mexicans. You never see them. They have basically segregated Afro-Mexicans to around one area in Mexico called Veracruz. The president even went there, or the president at the time went there, and they kind of did a special. But they have Afro-Mexican. There's black people in every country around the world, except for probably North Korea. I don't think there's no black people in North Korea, except for when Dennis Rodman went over there. But I digress. Okay, I digress. But so I think it's only important for us to understand what's going on here. Now, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, he issued a very fiery response to U.S. border czar Tom Homan, who threatened legal consequences, including arrest for officials who interfere with federal immigration operations in sanctuary cities. Now, Governor Newsom, responded via X in televised interviews. Tom, arrest me. Let's go. He accused the federal government of manufacturing a crisis for political spectacle and refused to back down. He demanded that the federal withdrawal of National Guard force and continue defending California sanctuary policies. And by the way, President Trump used the Army National Guard of California to thwart a lot of these protests and, as they're stating, unlawful and illegal assemblies. Again, this to basically gain control of LA that is literally on fire right now. There's protests, there's destruction of public property, etc. So when we look at these things, and Gavin Newsom, the only thing you have at your disposal that you're using is LAPD, where you also have the National Guard, where you could have done this. And I believe that President Trump used Title 21, if I recall reading that correctly, used Title 21, which gives him the power, the authority, and jurisdiction to deploy National Guard's troops. Okay, and again, they were using non-lethal protest tactics like tear gas, plastic bullets, batons, shields, etc. Okay, they wasn't using live rounds, bullets. They wasn't using anything like that. But when I look at these protests, when I look at the clashes of these two groups, people who are in support of illegal immigration and law enforcement, it really makes me think about the relationships between foundational Black Americans and Hispanics, as well as the Democratic Party. And I really think it's imperative that I break this down, because I really want to drive home my thoughts about these situations now that a lot of Hispanics are calling out for Black people to assist them in protesting so they can get their voices on the world stage. Because again, 99% of Black American protests is due to some sort of racial injustice. So let's just be clear, because Black American protesters, citizens, we exercise our First Amendment rights to address systematic injustice. We're talking about police brutality, racial profiling, unequal policing. These rights are constitutionally protected and recognized as fundamentals in U.S. jurisprudence. When it comes to illegal immigrant protesters, while asserting moral or humanitarian claims, it lacks legal status, which means their causes, though valid in many eyes because of the humanitarian nature of it all, are not backed by constitutional protections in the same way. Their actions can legally fall into obstruction of federal enforcement, and protesters may be subject to deportation. And here's another thing. President Trump utilizing Title 21, and please correct me if I'm wrong with the title, but nonetheless, President Trump using federal ordinance and federal legislation to deploy National Guard troops, more times than not, these state-ran National Guard troops are put on active duty. So now they're federal troops, thus the obstruction of federal enforcement. Number two, when we look at the Black Lives Matter movement, not the organization, which was a fraud, but the movement and similar movements, when we're talking about protests specifically, we're talking about documented injustices, police killings like Floyd, Taylor, and Nichols, systematic racism, the denial of equal protections, and the need for concrete reforms, i.e., even though this particular act was a nothing burger, but the George Floyd Injustice in Policing Act. Our demands push for transformation of law enforcement and accountability within the constitutional frameworks, While immigrant right protests often arise in response to ICE raids and deportation of people who are illegally in our country, or people who are maybe in a legal status but are spewing anti-American rhetoric, are driven by the humanitarian desire to keep families intact. However, these demonstrations oppose lawful actions taking under existing immigration statuses. This is not a policy debate. This is not a civil rights crisis. This is for people who are fighting for people to stay illegally in the country and for the country to be their welfare kings. See, when foundational Black Americans protest, authorities may respond with force, but legally, depending on jurisdiction. They cannot be deported or stripped of status. Talking about segregation, we've always been segregated on the most part. And the state may deploy police or National Guard during mass unrest, which President Trump has done. But the core demand remains within civil rights law, which are constitutionally protected. Now, in contrast, these so-called anti-ICE protests across Los Angeles, Paramount, Compton, that led to deployment of roughly 300 to 2,000 federalized National Guard troops without governor consent, a fact deemed unconstitutional by Governor Newsom. The deployment escalated tensions and sparked clashes, roadblocks, vehicle arson, and tear gas, situations that stem from defiance of federal immigration law. You're going against the law. That is why Black people in particular, because that's what they're calling out, Black people, we stood up for you guys. No, you didn't. Not in the mass droves that we stood up for ourselves and other groups. We don't want to support things that go against America. We don't want to support and protest for things that are illegally to our Constitution and to our immigration laws. Number 4. Non-citizens protest against deportation and hurriedly challenge federal legal processes, leading sometimes to designation of unlawful assemblies. Like downtown LA protests, they blocked the highways and basically the National Guard responded with tear gas. And when you look at the contrast in Black-led protests, these are expressions of the right to petition for redress. Though some escalated tensions, now 2020, Black Lives Matter movement and protests, our focus was systematic reform. You see that? You see the our focus was systematic reform, not disruption of lawful federal operations. When we speak about Black American protests, that we attract bipartisan, though imperfect, support, it's rooted in constitutional rights and civil reform goals. We're doing things within the Constitution that are federally protected. So when we look at the current dynamic situation we have, how Trump's framing of immigrant protests focuses on nationalism, calling for troops to liberate LA from an illegal immigrant invasion, invoking fear and justify National Guard, possibly Marines, framing immigration dissent as coercion, not constitutionally protests. Again, when Black people protest, it's because of systematic injustices that are federally protected through amendments and the Constitution. Now, lastly, Black American protests for justice, when we get in the streets and protest, we're not looking to destroy public property, government property, looting and rioting. And I stated before, are there some Black people who do those things? Absolutely. But the majority of our protests are peaceful. Majority of our protests are against improper killings and civil rights violations. And we're seeking legal and moral and national redemption. Many of our movements have resulted in real legislative reforms, like no-knock warrants, choke hold bans, police reform legislation. Now, when you're referring to anti-deportation protests, now, while empathetic to families, advocate against existing law enforcement mechanism, raising questions about the sanctuary or the sanctity of rule of law versus humanitarian appeals, nonetheless, is still illegal. Because if we kind of put this in a table, right? If we have on one side Black American protests, on the other side versus anti-ICE illegal immigrant protests, let's generalize these things. So legal standing, Black Americans, citizens with full rights. Citizens with full rights. When we talk about legal standing, citizens with full rights. Illegal immigrants are subject to immigration law because they're illegally in the country. What about the core demand, like police reform and civil rights, versus halt deportations and family separations of people who are legally in the country? What about the legal basis? Black Americans, First Amendment and constitutional rights versus, okay, those people who are anti-ICE, moral, humanitarian appeal versus statutory law. What people don't understand, and you know what, I'll leave that comment lastly. Government response. Often with Black Americans, it's repressive, but within civil rights scope. Anti-ICE, we're talking about federal incursion, judge, governor, tension, and guard, but nonetheless, we're still dealing with illegal things that are occurring illegally. And then the outcome goes. When Black American protests, we're not just protesting against being treated wrong, so to speak. We're protesting that we have been, done a great injustice, but we are protesting for legal and policy reform and legislation versus anti-ICE. Yeah, you may ask for some policy change versus enforcement status quo, but you're still doing it within the jurisdiction because of your illegal status. Now, the framing, Black Americans on one hand, we're talking about justice, equality, and safety of our people versus family unity in border enforcement of anti-ICE, but it's still within those legal confines. So Black Americans protest from citizenship to enforce our constitutional rights and seek justice, advocating reform within the system, not against legality. Now, in reference and contrast, illegal immigrant protesters, despite moral justification, are challenging federal law and provoking enforcement measures. And these actions risk classification under unlawful assembly, whereas Black-led movements operate under constitutional protection. Because under the surface of tear gas and rhetoric, this represents a fundamental distinction. Citizens asserting rights protected by the Constitution versus non-citizens resisting legally authorized federal operations, which the administration is framing an insurrection. So Black Americans stand on a firmer legal and moral ground when demanding justice and reform. That's the difference between the two. Citizens operating off constitutional rights versus people who are illegally in the country and people who are in support of people illegally in the country. The laws of America are not moral or ethical. Let me say it again. The laws of America are not ethical nor moral. So laws don't have emotions and feelings. Laws do not have emotions and feelings. Either you're breaking the law or you upholding the law.